Hey everyone, I've got a wild story to share. My in-laws flew off to Hawaii and left me alone with our silent daughter. Minutes later, she said 7 words that changed everything. If you want to hear more, give this a like and drop a comment below. Don't subscribe to the YouTube channel. You'll miss the next twist if you do. Let me introduce you in 3 quick lines. I'm Jessica. I've been married for 3 years, and this all happened when our daughter was 4. I'm turning 29 soon, and I never saw anything like this coming. It all began on a bright Monday morning. I woke up to the sound of quiet, too quiet. My husband David was packing his bag in the living room. He zipped it up, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "My parents will be here in an hour to take care of Emma while we fly out." I smiled and hugged him. He looked excited. His parents, Mary and Robert, had planned a beach trip to celebrate their 40th wedding anniversary. I tried not to feel left out. They were leaving behind their only grandchild, our sweet little Emma, who had not spoken a single word since she was 2 years old. That silence was part of her magic. Doctors said it was selective mutism, but we called it her little secret. She spoke perfectly at home to me and David, but the moment any other adult tried to talk, she would lock her lips shut. She didn't even speak to her grandparents. For 2 years, Mary and Robert had begged David for just 5 words. Whenever they came over, Emma would cover her ears or hide behind the couch. I worried and watched, but I never forced her. I believed she would speak when she was ready. Now my in-laws were on their way, and I felt a flutter in my stomach. What would happen when they tried again? I made pancakes, scrambled some eggs, and set a plate of fruit on the table. Emma sat in her high chair, coloring in a book, humming softly to herself. She always hummed when she was happy. Mary and Robert arrived right at 9. They stepped in, shining their smiles, and Mary waved at Emma. "Hello, sweetheart," she cooed, leaning over to ruffle her hair. Emma looked up, her big brown eyes curious but still quiet. Mary reached for her, then paused. She whispered to Robert, "Do you think today will be the day?" Robert chuckled and nodded. I waved goodbye as they backed out to the car. Mary turned to me. "Be kind to her, Jess. She's special." I nodded. "I will," I said, and they drove off. For the next 30 minutes, I tried to keep Emma busy. We played blocks, read her favorite book about a talking cat, and sang silly songs. She clapped and laughed, but didn't say a single word. My heart pounded. I knew what was coming. Mary and Robert had left a list of easy questions they would ask, so the answers could be yes or no. They even left a small toy as a prize. They had it all planned. I glanced at the clock. 9:45. 15 minutes until takeoff time. My suitcase lay open in the bedroom, but I stayed with Emma. I brushed her hair, tied it into pigtails, and kissed her forehead. Then I set the toy on the floor. It was a bright yellow car that made a honking sound. I said in a calm voice, "Emma, look at your car." She crawled over and pressed the button. "Honk," she giggled. Soft and sweet. I helped her back into her high chair. I poured her a snack of Cheerios into a little cup. "Here you go," I said. She munched, humming again. I watched her, my nerves twisting. I half expected to hear "Hi, Grandma," or "I love you," any moment, but nothing. At 9:55, I looked at the door. I imagined Mary stepping back in, waving, pockets full of questions like, "Do you want to go to the park?" I felt protective of Emma. I thought maybe it was better if just I was here. I told David I would pack the last of my suitcase faster if they wanted. Then I handed Emma her cup and said, "I'll be back in 1 minute, okay?" She nodded, her eyes following me. I shut the bedroom door, quickly zipped up the bag and grabbed my keys. Then I heard a car door slam outside. I ran to the window. It was them. Mary and Robert were back without a word. Mary carried a little notebook and a pen. Robert held a small recorder. They tiptoed up the path, grinning like kids. I wanted to warn them, but I also wanted to see what would happen. I opened the door and let them in. Mary said softly, "Ready for our questions?" I nodded. They walked into the living room, closed the door behind them, and there she sat, our silent child, coloring again. Mary spilled her list of questions onto the coffee table. The rules were simple. Ask one question, wait for an answer, reward with a smile or a toy. Robert lifted the recorder. "Okay," Mary whispered. "Emma, do you like apples?" I held my breath. Emma looked up but didn't speak. Mary smiled, tried again, more slowly. "Do you want a red apple?" No answer. Mary sighed and turned the page. "Do you like going to the park?" Emma tilted her head. No answer. Mary sighed louder. Robert frowned, as if in real pain. I felt my heart twist. My in-laws looked at me, confused. Why won't she answer? Mary asked. I opened my mouth to tell them about selective mutism, but they shook their heads. "This time will be different," Mary insisted, rising to her feet. "Watch." She walked to Emma's high chair and said, firm but gentle, "Emily, say Grandma." I cringed at the use of the wrong name. Our daughter was Emma. "Say Grandma, Emma." Still silence. I stood up. "She'll speak when she's ready," I said, but Mary didn't listen. She began again, louder. "Emma, say Grandma." Emma, startled, dropped her crayon and stared. My heart pounded hard. I moved to Mary's side and put my hand on her shoulder. "Please stop," I said. "You're scaring her." Mary glared at me, then at Emma, and whispered, "You're making her stubborn." She turned to Robert and snapped, "Let's go. This is hopeless." They stormed out, leaving the toy car abandoned, the questions scattered over the floor. I sank onto the couch, pulling Emma into my lap. She wrapped her arms around me and continued humming softly. I stroked her hair. "It's okay, honey," I whispered. "I'm here." Outside, I heard the engine start. I peered out the window. Mary and Robert were driving away again. I turned back to Emma, kissing her cheek. I realized I needed to calm down. I fetched a blanket and wrapped her up. I sat in the rocker, holding her. She closed her eyes, humming. My eyelids felt heavy. I thought I might drift off, but then I heard a crash. I jolted upright and looked around. The bright yellow car had fallen off the coffee table and rolled across the room, stopping at my feet. I picked it up, its honk button broken. I set it aside. I glanced at the clock, 10:15. My heart drummed. Where was my husband? He was on the plane by now, I was sure. He'd probably be texting me, but I didn't want to check. I stood and walked to the window. The street was empty. I turned and saw a small dust cloud near the front door. I put Emma down and went to look. The front door was slightly ajar. My hand trembled as I closed and locked it. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, but there was no one, just the empty hallway. I felt a chill. I checked every room, quickly. Emma clinging to me. It must have been my imagination. I sank back into the chair, holding her. We sat in silence, except for her humming. Then my phone buzzed. I picked it up. A text from David. Flight delayed. Back in 2 hours. I exhaled. 2 more hours with my silent daughter and my angry in-laws out on the road. I decided we needed a quiet game. I brought out her blocks and started building a tall tower. She helped, carefully stacking each block, humming a gentle tune. We laughed when it fell. Then we built again. That was the low moment, simple, safe, like nothing would ever happen. I felt proud of her for playing without pressure. Suddenly the power flickered. The lights dimmed. I jumped. Emma stopped humming and looked at me with wide eyes. "It's okay," I told her, though my voice trembled. The lights went out completely. The room was dark. I pressed my phone's flashlight app and aimed it at her face. Her eyes glowed back at me, curious. Then I heard the front door rattle. Someone was trying to open it. My heart slammed. I grabbed Emma and stood, wrapping my arms around her. My flashlight trembled. The knob twisted. I held my breath. The door clicked, creaked, and then silence. My hands were sweaty. Emma's humming stopped. She squeezed my arm. I shone the light at the door. Nothing. Just the knob. I moved to lock it again. My fingers fumbled. Finally, I heard it, a whisper. Not from outside, but right behind us. I froze. Emma and I stood in the dark living room. My breath caught. A soft voice, tiny, clear, said, "Mommy, hold me." And just like that, the lamps flickered back on. The room glowed bright again. I stared at Emma. She stood there, arms open, looking at me. I felt my breath catch. The moment was so intense, so unexpected I couldn't move. Emma had said 7 words, her first words to anyone else. My heart thundered in my chest as I realized what had just happened. The world seemed to stop. I held her tight, my ears ringing. I wanted to shout with joy and relief, but my mouth went dry. I only stared at her, stunned and trembling. The moment the lights came back on, I froze. Emma's small voice, so clear and calm in the dark, echoed in my ears. "Mommy, hold me." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my throat. Tears stung my eyes as I knelt in front of her, wrapping my arms around her tiny body. She relaxed into my embrace, her head resting on my chest, humming a soft little tune I'd never heard before. I stroked her hair, too stunned to speak. My mind raced. Had she really said 7 words? I tried to count them. Mommy, 1, hold, 2, me, 3, but I'd lost track in the shock. Maybe I misheard. But her voice was so sweet, so unmistakable. I looked at her wide brown eyes and knew this was real. My phone buzzed again. Another text from David. I ignored it. Nothing else mattered right now. I lifted Emma onto my lap and rocked her gently in the chair. Her little legs kicked happily, and she giggled. The room felt warm and safe. I pressed my cheek to hers. "I'm here, sweetheart," I whispered. "I love you so much." Emma pulled back and tapped my chin. "Kiss me, Mommy," she said, her voice soft like a butterfly. My tears fell freely. She had spoken 4 words just then. "Kiss me, Mommy." I kissed her forehead over and over, and she giggled again. I gathered the scattered toys from the floor and set them on the coffee table. One by one, I asked her simple questions, not pushing, just asking, "Do you see your blocks?" She pointed at them and said, "Blocks go boom." Another 3 words, "Blocks go boom," and I felt my heart swell. She was talking to me, outside our home and outside our small family bubble. I spent the next hour just listening. Emma told me she was hungry, asking for more Cheerios, please, and even asked, "Where's Daddy gone?" Her voice was steady, confident, full of life. I couldn't believe it. I could hardly catch my breath. Then, at 11:00, the front door burst open and Mary and Robert stamped inside. Their faces were pale. Mary's eyes were wide as saucers. "She spoke," she gasped. Robert shuffled in, fiddling with the question notebook he'd left behind. I held Emma out so they could see her smile. Emma waved at them and said, "Grandma, I love you." 5 simple words. I watched Mary's tears fall. Robert's mouth hung open, but their joy didn't last. Mary cleared her throat and said, "Emma, say thank you for the toy car." Emma tilted her head and whispered, "No more games." Panic flashed in Mary's eyes. "Games," she said, "but we just wanted to help." Emma's little voice took on a stern tone. "No more tricks." Then she turned to me, eyes bright. "Just Mommy, please." And she sank into my arms. Mary and Robert looked at each other, confused and hurt. I could feel my cheeks grow hot. I stood and held Emma tightly. "She's been waiting for the right moment," I said softly. "She needed to feel safe." Mary's lip trembled. Robert set his recorder down and backed away. I led Emma into the kitchen for a snack, just a quiet time for us. We sat at the table with a plate of sliced bananas and peanut butter toast. Emma asked for "Cold milk, please," and I poured it. Then she slurped it down and burped, giggling wildly. I laughed too, relief flooding through me. Mary hovered by the doorway. I gestured for her to sit. She tiptoed in and settled on a chair. Robert remained standing, arms crossed. "I'm sorry," Mary said. "I just wanted you to be part of our world." Emma looked up at her grandmother and said, "Be nice, Grandma." 2 more words, "Be nice," and Mary's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. For the next hour, we played simple games. I hid under a blanket and popped out. Emma squealed. She chased me around the kitchen island. We sang, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." It was a gentle, happy time. Emma spoke in full sentences, asking where is Daddy's plane and when will he come home. I checked my phone. David's flight was delayed further, landing at 2:30. 2.5 more hours alone. Everything felt peaceful. I watched Emma stack her toy animals by size. She organized them just like me, smallest to largest, a quiet, focused activity. She said, "Zebra is tallest," pointing, then "Mouse is smallest." I smiled at her. She looked at me, ran to the window and said, "Sun is bright." Then she paused, eyes wide. "Something's wrong." I turned. Mary and Robert stood frozen in the hallway. The front door swung open on its own, slamming against the wall. A cold breeze blew through, scattering the question sheets across the floor. Emma shrank back, clutching my leg. Her humming stopped. I felt my heart leap into my throat. Mary rushed forward to close the door, but the knob twisted in her hand without the key. Robert bolted across the hall to lock it from the inside. I grabbed Emma and moved away. The wind howled, rattling the windows. I checked the weather app on my phone. It showed clear skies. No storm was coming. The lights flickered again. Emma's toy zebra slammed off the table and crashed onto the floor. The refrigerator behind us banged, its door shut. I held Emma close, rocking her. She buried her face in my shoulder and whimpered. Then, in the sudden darkness between flickers, I heard a deep voice, low, almost a growl. Right behind me, "Hello, Jessica." I froze, my blood turning to ice. Emma tightened her grip, tiny fingers digging into my shirt. I dared not move or breathe. The lights snapped back on, and there was nobody there, just Mary and Robert staring at me with terror in their eyes. My breath came in short gasps. Emma peeked over my shoulder and whispered, "Mommy, I'm scared." Mary's hand trembled on the doorknob. Robert dropped the lock key on the floor and stared at the empty hallway. I felt a cold sweat run down my back. The calm afternoon had shattered in an instant, replaced by something dark and unknown. The room hung silent for a long moment after the lights snapped back on. My heart pounded so loud I thought Emma would hear it. She clung to me, her little body trembling. Mary and Robert stood frozen near the door, their faces pale as ghosts. I rocked Emma slowly, whispering, "I'm right here, sweetie. You're safe with me." But inside I was shaking too. Then Mary found her voice. Who said that?" she stammered, her hand still on the doorknob. Robert crept forward, peering down the hallway. "There's no one here," he said, voice shaking. I swallowed hard and set Emma gently on the floor. She pressed her face against my leg, looking up at me with big, worried eyes. I forced myself to stand and walked toward the hallway. My legs felt like jelly. I flicked the light switch off and on, nothing unusual. I swung the door open and looked up and down the empty corridor. No shadows moved, no strange shapes, just the same old family photos on the walls and the carpeted floor leading to the bedrooms. I turned back to the living room. Mary was closing the front door firmly, double, locking it this time. Robert checked the windows, making sure they were shut tight. I watched them, my mind racing. That voice, deep, low, real, had called my name. It came from right behind me in the dark. How could there be no one there now? I gathered Emma into my arms again. Her eyes were big and scared. "Mommy, is it a monster?" she whispered. My heart broke at her words. I pressed her close. "No, sweetheart. No monsters here." But I didn't know if that was true. Mary put a trembling hand on my shoulder. "Jessica!" Maybe it was just the wind or the house settling. She tried to smile, but her eyes were full of doubt. Robert nodded and said, "Old houses can make weird noises." Our home was only 5 years old in Redwood Hollow Estates, but I forced myself to believe him. I took a deep breath and led them back into the living room. I set Emma on the rug and crouched down so I could see her eyes. "Emma," I said gently, "can you tell me anything about that voice?" She bit her lip, looking at her little toes. Then she shook her head and whispered, "It was dark." That was 2 words, but they felt like a clue. I stood and said, "Let's turn on some music and have a snack. Maybe it will calm us." I went to the kitchen and carried out a plate of cheese cubes and apple slices. I poured water into little cups. Mary took 1 cup and sat next to Emma on the rug. Robert filled his own cup and joined us. For the next 20 minutes, we played a quiet game of memory cards. Emma flipped cards and matched the pictures: dogs, cats, cars, trees. She laughed when she found a pair. We hugged her when she got 5 pairs in a row. It felt safe and warm. I tried to relax, telling myself that weird things happen in houses sometimes. Maybe we were all just tense after the earlier panic. After the cards, Emma asked to read her favorite story, The Little Cloud That Found Its Rainbow. I sat on the couch with Emma in my lap and opened the book. As I read aloud, Emma pointed at each picture and whispered her own comments. Blue cloud, raindrops, bright colors. She was back to her sweet self, chattering happily. It felt like a gift to hear her voice, so naturally. We finished the story and Mary suggested we go outside for a bit of fresh air. It was almost noon, and the sun streamed through the windows. I agreed. We all stood, and I led us down the front path to the small backyard patio. Emma ran to the swing set in our neighbor's yard. You can see it from ours, and waved at it. She said, "Swing high, Mommy." I lifted her into the swing, and she squealed as I pushed her gently. The breeze brushed her hair across her face, and she laughed. "Faster, please." That laugh felt like sunshine after the dark moment earlier. Mary and Robert sat on the patio chairs sipping water. Mary looked at me and said, "I'm sorry I pushed so hard before. I just wanted Emma to talk." I smiled and said, "She'll speak when she's ready." In that bright yard, everything felt hopeful again. Emma's giggles filled the air as she swung higher, her pigtails flying. But then, as I leaned back to push her one more time, I heard a strange creaking from the side gate. I turned my head. The gate's latch clicked open slowly, even though it was locked tight this morning. I froze. Emma sensed something was wrong and stopped giggling. I jumped off the swing and reached for her. Mary and Robert stood too. Robert shouted, "Who's there?" But no one answered. The gate swung wide, creaking on its hinges. I saw a dark shape slip in behind it, moving toward the patio. My heart raced. I grabbed Emma and ran inside, slamming the door. I locked and locked it, then dragged Mary and Robert in. We locked all the doors and windows, just as before. Mary covered Emma's ears. Robert checked the corners of the room. I hugged Emma tightly, rocking her. The house felt smaller and more dangerous than ever. I whispered to Emma, "You're safe now. Mommy's here." She looked up at me with wide eyes and said, "It's coming." I froze. "What is?" I asked, but she didn't answer. She only buried her face against me. The room was silent except for our quiet breaths. Then, from the kitchen, came a loud crash, like a heavy chair tipping over. We all jumped. I set Emma on the couch and edged toward the kitchen. Mary and Robert stayed behind me as if I were the lead. I flicked on the light switch. The kitchen was dark. Pots and pans lay scattered on the floor. The refrigerator door swung open, its light glaring down at me. I called out, "Hello? Who's there?" My voice sounded small. No answer. I stepped in, careful not to touch anything. The wall clock ticked loudly. I picked up a pan and held it like a shield. I walked to the refrigerator and closed its door. The light went out. I turned and saw footprints on the tile floor Wet prints, as if someone had walked through water. They led toward the back door. My blood ran cold. I dropped the pan and ran back to the living room. I grabbed Emma's hand. "We have to leave," I said, voice shaking. Mary nodded and said, "Yes, we must go to the car." Robert fumbled for the keys in his pocket. We crept through the dark hallway, all four of us, toward the front door. I reached for the doorknob, but the lights flickered off again. We stood in pitch dark. Emma whimpered. I closed my eyes and felt for the wall. My hand found the light switch, but didn't dare flick it on. Then I heard whispering, soft, urgent, right in my ear, "Don't leave." My skin prickled. I froze, my heart pounding. Emma pulled on my shirt and said in a small voice, "Mommy, it's here." And in that moment, the lights burst back on, and standing in the hallway was a tall figure in black, its face hidden in shadow, blocking our only exit. The lights burst back on, and there it stood in the hallway, a tall figure draped in black from head to toe, its face hidden in shadow. My heart slammed against my ribs. Emma clutched my leg, her small fingers digging into my jeans. Mary froze behind us, her hand pressed to her mouth. Robert gripped the recorder, notebook like a shield. I took a shaky step forward, holding Emma close. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling. The figure didn't move. It blocked the way, its long coat brushing the carpet. The hallway light haloed its shape, but not its face. My mind raced. Was this a burglar? A stranger who slipped in through the gate? Why stand in the dark, hiding its face? Emma whimpered, "Mommy, please." I bent down and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here." But inside I felt like collapsing. The figure raised one arm slowly. I tensed, ready to push past or run. But then it pointed to the living room behind me. Its finger was long and thin like a branch. My throat went dry. Mary stepped forward. Are you hurting her?" she asked, voice small. No answer, only stillness. I took a deep breath. "Leave us alone," I said. "We haven't done anything to you." The figure's head tilted just a fraction, as if listening. Then it swept its arm in a silent motion, down the hallway, past the front door. It seemed to beckon us to follow. Robert took a step. "Should we go?" he whispered. Mary nodded slowly. I looked at Emma, whose eyes were wide but trusting. I realized maybe this was not a threat, but a guide of some kind. Something in the air shifted, like a quiet invitation. I squared my shoulders and said, "All right, show us." I turned toward the hallway. Emma hesitated, then gripped my hand. Mary and Robert filed behind us. The figure glided back toward the front door, as if opening a hidden path. I reached the door and saw that the deadbolt was unlocked, even though I clearly locked it moments ago. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. Something was not right. We followed the figure outside into the front porch. The air was still and cool. The sun glinted off the windows. On the walkway, I saw footprints in the dew, small and childlike, and larger ones beside them. But there was no one there. I crouched to examine them. Emma hovered behind me, peeking over my shoulder. "There are prints," I said softly. "And someone else's." Mary moved closer. "That's impossible," she whispered. "We just came through here." But the footprints led off the porch toward the street. The figure disappeared into the afternoon glare, melting into the brightness. I blinked, and it was gone. I stood, pulling Emma close. "What just happened?" I asked, voice barely audible. Mary bit her lip. "I don't know." Robert looked at the recorder in his hand, opened it, and found the recording blank. "I heard nothing," he said in disbelief. I shook my head. "We need to stay calm." I brushed Emma's hair from her face. "Let's go back inside and just be together." I led them back into the house, locking the front door again. Emma closed her eyes and leaned against my leg, trembling. I lifted her and carried her back to the living room sofa. We settled in together. The sun slanted through the windows, making dust motes dance. Everything looked peaceful, almost normal. I wrapped a blanket around Emma and Mary. Robert sat on the arm of the sofa, running his fingers through his hair. I exhaled slowly. Emma, can you tell me more about what you felt? She tucked her head on my shoulder and said, quietly, it was cold. That was 2 words, but it was important. She pulled back and added, then it was bright. For simple words, but they painted a picture. Mary reached over and stroked Emma's hair. You did so well, baby. Emma sniffled and said, I don't want him. I looked at her. Who? She pointed toward the hallway and said, the man. Then, more softly, he wants me. My blood ran cold. I hugged her tight. No one can have you but me. I kissed her hair. Mommy will protect you. Mary stood and cleared her throat. I think we should call David. I nodded and grabbed my phone. The screen lit up. The flight was delayed again, now arriving at 4:00. My fingers paused over the keypad. Robert said, maybe we should call the police just in case. Mary's face went pale. The police? Jessica, they'll think we're crazy. I looked at them both. We don't know what's happening, but we've seen something strange. It might be safer if someone official checks the house. Mary bit her lip, then nodded. I dialed 911. While I waited, I sat on the carpet with Emma, drawing her close. She hummed softly, the tune from this morning. I rubbed her back. We're okay, I whispered. Her head nodded against me. The operator said help was on the way. I hung up and turned to Mary and Robert. It'll take them a few minutes to arrive, I said. Mary sighed. I guess we should wait here. Robert grabbed his notebook. I'm writing everything down, the times, the words, the prints. I nodded. Good idea. I looked at Emma. Do you want to play a quiet game? She shook her head. I just want you. I smiled and held her extra tight. We sat in the living room, the 3 of us with Emma between us. The afternoon sun warmed the hardwood floor. The clock ticked. I felt my heart slow as we stayed close. We whispered stories of our favorite memories. Our first family picnic, the day Emma learned to crawl, the night of our wedding cake tasting. Laughing softly, we felt calmer. Then Mary said, Jessica, I'm sorry for doubting you earlier. I never meant to scare her. I squeezed her hand. I know. You love her so much. She looked at Emma and smiled through tears. I promised to be kinder. Emma raised her head. She looked at Mary and said in a quiet voice, Please be nice. 2 words, but they were enough. Mary nodded, wiping her cheeks. Robert cleared his throat. The police should be here soon. We waited in silence, listening for sirens. None came. The doorbell rang instead. They're here, I whispered. I stood, holding Emma's hand. I'll get it. I moved to the door and peeked through the peephole. But the porch was empty, no officers, no cars. Just the afternoon light and the footprints leading away. My heart lurched. I swallowed hard and opened the door a crack. The hallway was empty. No sign of shoes. I closed it and locked it again, more firmly than before. Mary and Robert stared. Where are they? Mary asked. I shook my head. I don't know. Suddenly, the front windows rattled. A low wind blew around the house, even though the doors were locked. Emma whimpered. I scooped her up and backed away. Mary ran to the windows and tried to close the curtains, but they moved on their own, flapping in the sudden breeze. Robert shouted, Mom! Jess! Look! I turned to see the family portraits on the wall sway, as if an unseen hand brushed past them. Emma clutched me and said, Stay with me. I pressed her to my chest. I'm here, sweetheart. Mary and Robert moved to hug us both. In that moment, the breeze died and everything went silent again. We stood in the stillness. The afternoon light softened, and the sun began its slow descent. The house felt empty and eerie. I looked at the clock. 3:15. Only 45 minutes until David was supposed to land. Then, From the hallway behind us came a soft click, like a lock twisting. I spun around. The hallway door was closed, exactly as we had left it, but now its lock was undone. My heart froze. The click of the hallway lock echoed through the silent house, and I froze, Emma clutching my shirt. My heart pounded like a drum. Mary and Robert pressed close behind us, eyes wide. In the hallway, the door stood closed, locked a moment ago, now unlocked by some unseen hand. My legs shook as I stepped forward. "Stay together," I whispered, voice trembling. I held Emma's hand and nudged Mary and Robert ahead. We entered the hallway, each step heavier than the last. The walls felt too close, the family photos watching us like silent ghosts. I reached the door and took a deep breath. I turned the knob, but before I could open it, the lights flickered and went out. I dropped Emma's hand and covered her ears. The house was